Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at the new TT Artisan's 23mm f1.4 lens for Micro Four Thirds. And full disclosure, they did send this lens out to me for free in exchange for review, but with that said, the opinions are always my own, and I wasn't paid separately to do this review. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, let's take a closer look at the lens itself. I think it's really a very good looking lens, and it's well made. It's a nice all-metal build. It weighs about 222 grams, so it has some heft to it. And on the front here we have a metal lens cap with a 43mm lens ring threads in here, and for filters and things. But this lens cap is very similar to the TT Artisan's fisheye lens I reviewed, where it just kind of slips on and off by friction. So I think in a bag this will be fine. It's not going to come off, but I wouldn't leave this on if I have the camera hanging on around my neck, because it just doesn't instill a lot of confidence that that's going to stay on there. If you bump into something or something. But in any case, the focusing ring here in the middle is really nicely dampened, and it's about a quarter turn or a little over a quarter turn from minimum focusing distance to infinity. And then we have our feet and meters markers and depth of field markers, and then on the front we have the aperture ring. And this design is actually very similar to my vintage Olympus OM lens here, where we had the focusing ring in the middle and aperture ring here on the front, and the depth of field indicators here. And the dampening is very similar to this lens, so it feels really good in here. And in practice, I found it very easy to focus this lens in the field. However, the aperture ring is a little bit weird because it's also dampened. And I think for video work, this is fine because it minimizes any kind of sound you might hear when you're changing aperture during video. But for photography, I prefer a little more positive feedback, because when I was wearing gloves, I had a very hard time feeling if I was clicked into an aperture or not. I had to kind of rock it back and forth when I was wearing my gloves. Now, barehanded, I can feel it, no problem, but it's just a little bit too dampened for wearing gloves and being able to tell if you clicked in. Also, the way it clicks is a little bit weird. And let me show you what I mean. So we're at f1.4, then it clicks to about a half stop here before f2, then full stop to f2, a half click here, then full stop f2.8, another half click, then another full stop click to f4, but then it goes full stop to f5.6, full stop to f8, and two full stops to f16. So it actually skips a stop, which would be f11. And if we look at the vintage lens here, you'll notice we're at f1.8, and then it's a little over a full stop to f2.8, then full stop f4, 5.6, f8, 11, then 16. And you can see these are nice positive clicks. Very good feedback when I'm changing apertures, unlike this lens. So it's going to take some getting used to if you want to try and use the aperture ring by feel, especially if you're wearing gloves. But again, the focusing ring is almost perfect in my opinion. So here's how it looks on my Olympus Pen F. Fits very nicely. It's a good size, good weight. It feels good on here. Easy to focus and adjust the aperture. No problems here. Now my M1 Mark III, I think this lens complements this camera very nicely as well. It looks really good on here. And in terms of handling, yeah, very easy to reach the focusing and the aperture. No problems here. And just to give you another quick comparison, over here I have the Olympus 25mm f1.8, and this is the TT Artisan's f1.4. And they are virtually almost exactly the same size. Really, I can't tell any difference other than the weight. All right, now let's look at some testing I did in my backyard. We're going to look at sharpness in the center, out to the corners. We're going to look at vignetting and purple fringing and flaring and all that fun stuff. And also I'm going to compare a little bit against the Olympus 25mm f1.8, because I think it's always important to do comparisons of one lens against a similar lens just to kind of see where they each stand. Okay, so here we are wide open on both lenses, 1.4 on the TT Artisans and 1.8 on the Olympus. And I focused right here on the center on this branch here, and you can see that both lenses are actually not doing a bad job. I'd give the Olympus a slight edge, But in practice, you know, when you back off, I'd say they both look really good. However, let's go out to the edges a little bit, about midway. And here you can see that the T Artisans is definitely starting to get a little bit softer on the branches and things as we move out. And then going all the way, say, to this corner here, you can see that definitely the T Artisans is very, very soft and busy in comparison to the Olympus wide open. And looking at the vignetting, you can see there's a little bit of vignetting here, but there's also vignetting going on, I think, with the Olympus as well when we're wide open. But so about the same there. Looking at both lenses set to f2, if we go to the center, I would say that, yeah, they're both equal about here. I really don't see any difference here. And then going out about halfway, again, the T Artisans is still getting softer than the Olympus lens, just as soon as we get a little bit out of center. And then going up to the corner, again, there's a lot of softness here on the T Artisans. But backing off, when you look at these, they don't look bad overall. And the vignetting has cleaned up quite a bit here on the T Artisans, whereas you can see on the Olympus, there's still quite a bit of vignetting happening. But let's look at the f2.8. Now at f2.8, let's go to the center. And I'd say they both look very good. In fact, I'd give a little bit of an edge to the T Artisans, if anything. But pretty equivalent. And let's go out to the middle here, and the T Artisans has improved quite a bit. Still not quite as good as the Olympus in terms of sharpness, but close enough. But then let's go out to the edge here, and yeah, you can see, even though it has improved some, it's still not quite as good as the Olympus. Let's try this corner here. Yeah, again, I'd give the Olympus the edge here. Looking at f4, let's go to the center. And yeah, it's looking good. I'd say the T Artisans actually is even sharper than the Olympus lens at f4. And going to the middle here, yep, T Artisans is cleaned up very nicely. It's, I would say, equivalent now to the Olympus at this point. And going up to this leaf, yep, they both look really good. I would say at f4, the T Artisans is caught up to the Olympus lens. Yeah, it's looking very good. And of course, all the vignetting's gone on both lenses at this point. Now at f5.6, both looking very good here in the center. I would call that equal. Going over here, I would say those were equal as well. And then out to this leaf here. Yeah, at f5.6, I think definitely the T Artisans is caught up. And let's just check this corner. Yeah, very good. Okay, now at f8, let's go to the center. Both looking good, as expected. Still looking good here. I would say they're still equal. And up here on this leaf, still equal, maybe a slight edge in contrast on the T Artisans, but that might just be the mild difference in exposure, if any. And then over here, yeah, both are looking really, really good. And then, like I said, I couldn't dial in f11, so let's look at f16 at the center, and diffraction is definitely set in on both lenses. I can definitely see some softness here on both. Let's go out to the middle. Yep, both look good. And this leaf over here, yeah, both are looking really good. Now in this test, I just wanted to see how the flaring and purple fringing and everything is at different apertures. So here we are at f1.4, looking straight into the sun. And yeah, there's some very mild purple fringing happening here And certainly some softness as we saw before, but yeah, the purple fringing and stuff is pretty much under control, and there's a little bit of flare right here that you can see. And moving on to f2, the fringing may be a little bit less, but it's still present, albeit very mildly. I don't really see anything, and of course the flaring is still there. Going to f2.8, the flaring and purple fringing, or the purple fringing. Going to 2.8, the purple fringing seems to have almost been eliminated at this point, but the flaring hasn't changed. And here we are at f4, and we're starting to get a little bit of a starburst effect, and the flaring is a little bit more pronounced. And purple fringing is all but gone at this point. f5.6, nice little starburst here, a little more defined flaring over here, and purple fringing, like I said, virtually non-existent. And at f8, very, very nice starburst at this point, nice strong flaring, and no purple fringing that I can see. And finally at f16, the starburst has expanded a little bit, but not that much over the f8, but the flaring is definitely much more defined over here. And then going in, and yeah, it's softened up due to diffraction, but I really don't see any purple fringing. All right, now with this image here, the aperture doesn't matter. I'm just looking for barrel distortion, and I can certainly see there's a tiny bit going on here. And I found that if I just dialed in, say, a +5, that seems to have corrected it very easily. So overall, I would say the lens performance is acceptable. Between 1.4 and f4, certainly the lens got a little bit soft as soon as you got away from the center, especially towards the extremes. But, you know, in actual pictures, you're really not going to see that until you start pixel peeping. And certainly at f5.6 and f8 performed very similar, if not identical, to the Olympus lens. So I think it did a really, really good job overall, considering the price point, where I believe the TT Artisans is going for about $100, and the Olympus version is going closer to $300 or $400, right? Now, one last thing I want to show you before we get to the images I took is just a close focusing distance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the lens to its minimum focusing distance, use the magnify feature so I can kind of see on the screen when I got things in focus. And it looks like right about there is the closest I can get. And that measures roughly from the front of here to the front of the lens, roughly about 16 centimeters. Now here are some images I took last week during our snowstorm, and really I thought the lens rendered the colors and the images beautifully. I have very soft bokeh, nice details, even wide open. And you know, you don't have to stop the lens down too much to get starburst effect. You know, f8 will do it, and I like the flaring effect that I'm getting. And honestly, I didn't notice the softness in the corners until I did the review for this test. I was really very happy with this lens, and I still am with how it took these images. And as you can see, it was very easy to use in the field, easy to focus, and it was really just a pleasure to use. So I think at this price point, the TT Artisans did a pretty good job. I mean, yeah, it's a little soft between f1.4 and f4, but it cleaned up very nicely by f5.6. And certainly, you know, it didn't perform anywhere near as well as the Olympus, but that lens costs 3 or 4 times as much, right? So it makes a very compelling case for the TT Artisans. That said, there's the Panasonic 25mm f1.7, right? And that'll give you autofocus and sharpness and performance very similar, if not equal, to the Olympus 25mm. So it makes it a tougher choice between the Panasonic and the TT Artisans. But the Panasonic is your plastic fantastic, right? and it has a plastic lens barrel, plastic lens mount. So the build qualities are very different versus the TT Artisan's all metal design. And certainly the manual focus experience is by far superior on the TT Artisans. So really, if you're looking for sort of that vintage experience of manually focusing and getting sort of the defects like the softness and things that you find in vintage lenses, you're going to enjoy using the TT Artisans much more than sort of the clinical sharpness that you get out of the autofocus lenses from Panasonic and Olympus. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, consider subscribing to the channel, hit the like button. But either way, I appreciate you watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.